People think revenge is loud, but the truth is, it whispers, it waits, it watches, and when it strikes, it changes everything. I'm Adam, and this is Revenge with Adam, where I bring you the stories of those who underestimated, betrayed, or crossed the wrong person. Before we dive into today's story, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. And if you've ever dealt with nightmare neighbors, drop a comment below. I want to hear your stories. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see nothing is ever as it seems. It started with a bass beat. Not just any bass, the kind that rattles your walls, the kind that shakes your ceiling fan, the kind that makes your coffee vibrate across the table at 10 o'clock at night, every single night. The neighbors above my apartment, a group of college students who thought the world revolved around their parties, assumed I had no right to complain. After all, they were young, they were having fun, and I was just the guy downstairs who needed to lighten up. Let me paint you a picture. I was 32 years old, a software developer working remotely for a tech company on the West Coast. I'd moved into this apartment specifically because it was supposed to be quiet. The listing literally described it as a peaceful community perfect for professionals. The rent? $1,850 a month for a two-bedroom. Not cheap, but I valued my peace, my space, my ability to work from home without distractions.
The building itself was beautiful. A converted brownstone with classic architecture, tree-lined street, the kind of place you see in movies about successful people living their best lives. I'd been there for 2 years before they moved in. 2 peaceful, productive, wonderful years. And then, everything changed. They arrived on a Saturday in late August, 3 of them, early 20s. I watched from my window as they hauled in furniture, cases of beer, and here's the kicker, a massive subwoofer that required 2 of them to carry. A sound system that probably cost more than my entire month's rent. I should have known then. But I'm an optimist. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Wrong. The first party was that very night. I was working on a critical project deadline, a software update that needed to be deployed by Monday morning. I'd planned to work late, probably until 2 or 3 a.m. At 9 p.m., the music started. At first, it was tolerable, background noise. I put on my headphones and tried to focus. By 10 p.m., the bass was so intense that my desk was vibrating. My monitor was shaking. I could feel it in my chest, that physical sensation when bass is so loud it literally affects your heartbeat. I took off my headphones. Maybe it would be brief, right? Maybe they'd wind down soon. By 11 p.m., I couldn't concentrate at all. Every few seconds, boom, another bass hit would shake my ceiling. Dust particles drifted down from the cracks in the plaster. By midnight, I could hear people stomping, dancing, shouting, laughing. That drunk laughter that comes from people who genuinely don't care who hears them. I tried to keep working. I really did. But around 1 a.m., I made a decision. I saved my work, closed my laptop, and went upstairs. At first, I tried the normal approach, the reasonable approach. I knocked on their door, smiled politely, and explained that the noise was making it impossible to work. I had a deadline. I needed to concentrate. Surely they could turn it down. The guy who answered was around 22, tall, athletic, backwards baseball cap, holding a red Solo cup. Behind him, I could see at least 20 people crammed into an apartment the same size as mine. "Aw, man, sorry about that," he said, words slightly slurred. "We didn't realize anyone could hear it." I wanted to ask how they possibly couldn't realize that concert-level bass might travel through an 80-year-old building, but I stayed polite. "No problem. Just if you could keep it down after midnight, I'd really appreciate it." "Yeah, absolutely, man. We'll turn it down right now." He seemed genuine. I actually believed him. I went back downstairs. For about 10 minutes, the music did get quieter. Then someone turned it back up, louder than before. It didn't stop until 4 a.m. I didn't finish my project. I had to email my boss and ask for an extension, something I'd never done in 5 years with the company. I felt humiliated, unprofessional. But I told myself, it's a one-time thing. Move-in party. Won't happen again. It happened the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. By the end of the first week, I realized this wasn't occasional partying. This was their lifestyle. Sunday through Thursday, music from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. minimum. Friday and Saturday, 10 p.m. to 4 or 5 a.m. I was functioning on 3 to 4 hours of sleep at night. My work performance was declining. I was irritable, exhausted. My entire life revolved around when the noise would start and when it might stop. I tried again. This time, I waited until the next afternoon when they'd be sleeping off hangovers. I knocked, pounded, really, until one of them stumbled to the door. Different guy this time, shorter, scruffier. He squinted at me like I'd just woken him from a coma. What? Not even trying to hide his annoyance. The noise. Every night this week, it's been impossible to sleep. He shrugged. It's not that loud. It is that loud. I can feel it in my chest. My ceiling is shaking. Another shrug. Look, man, we're college students. We're gonna have people over sometimes. That's just how it is. I felt my patience starting to fray. I'm not asking you to never have people over. I'm asking you to respect quiet hours, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's in the lease. He leaned against the doorframe, looking at me like I was the most boring person he'd ever met. You know what your problem is? You need to lighten up. You're like 30-something, right? Living alone, working from home. You probably don't even have friends. No offense, but maybe if you got out more, you wouldn't care so much about a little music. I felt my jaw tighten. Every muscle in my body wanted to respond, to tell him exactly what I thought of his amateur psychology. But I didn't, because I knew that's what he wanted. He wanted me to lose my temper, to give him ammunition to play the victim. So instead, I said, very calmly, I'm asking you, neighbor to neighbor, to please keep the noise down after 10 p.m. He smirked. I'll see what I can do. Then he closed the door in my face. That night, the music started at 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes before quiet hours even began, and it was louder than ever. I realized then that talking to them directly wasn't going to work. They didn't respect me. They saw me as an obstacle to their fun, not as a person whose life they were affecting. So, I escalated. I wrote a handwritten note, took my time on it, made it friendly, respectful, even included my phone number. The note said, Hey neighbors, I know you're settling into your new place, and I want you to feel welcome. I also want to be a good neighbor, which is why I wanted to reach out about the noise levels. No one per the building's quiet hours. Thanks. Adam, Apartment 2A. I slid it under their door on a Tuesday afternoon. That night, the music started at 10 p.m. sharp, so loud I could hear the lyrics clearly through my ceiling. I checked under their door the next morning. The note was gone. They'd read it. They just didn't care. Over the next week, I tried variations, left another note, then another, each one more direct but still polite. None of them made any difference. That's when I decided to involve the building manager. His name was Richard, a tired-looking man in his mid-50s who'd been managing the property for almost a decade. His office was cramped, filled with filing cabinets and the smell of stale coffee. I explained everything. The constant noise, the lack of response to my requests, the violation of quiet hours. Richard sighed, the kind of deep, weary sigh that told me he'd had this conversation 1,000 times before. Yeah, I've gotten a couple other complaints about them too. So, what can be done? He pulled out a massive 3-ring binder labeled Tenant Issues
and flipped through pages of handwritten notes. I'll send them a written warning. That's the first step. If they continue, we can start the formal violation process. How long does that take? Another sigh. Depends. Could be weeks, could be months. These things take time. Months? I can't deal with this for months. I'm barely sleeping. It's affecting my work. Richard looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes. Sympathy, maybe, but also resignation. The look of someone who'd learned that some problems don't have quick solutions. I understand, but I have to follow the process. I can't just evict people because a neighbor complained once. I'll send the warning letter today. The warning letter was delivered 3 days later. That night, the music was louder than it had ever been. I called Richard, left a voicemail, then another, then another. He never called back. I started sending emails, first to Richard, then to the property management company's general inbox, then to their corporate office. Regarding noise complaint, Unit 3A. Follow-up. Ongoing.
Unanswered. The few responses I got were generic. We've forwarded your complaint to the noise violations. Unit 3A. Urgent. Repeated violations of quiet hours policy. Most went, building manager. Or, this issue is being addressed through proper channels. Nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. The students realized their behavior had no consequences, and when people realize they can do whatever they want without repercussions, they push boundaries even further. The parties grew larger, louder, more frequent. It wasn't just nighttime anymore. On weekends, the music would start at noon and continue until dawn. 20, 30, sometimes 40 people streaming in and out. They'd smoke in the hallways, against building rules, leave trash in the stairwell, prop open the security door. The building was deteriorating, and management didn't care. But it wasn't just affecting me anymore. Other neighbors started reaching out. Mrs. Chen in 3B, an elderly woman who'd lived there for 15 years, knocked on my door one evening with tears in her eyes. I can't sleep anymore. My bedroom is right below theirs. Every night, the stomping, the music. I have a heart condition. The stress is making it worse. Marcus in 2C was a resident surgeon who worked night shifts. The daytime parties were destroying his ability to sleep, making him dangerously exhausted at the hospital. The Johnsons in 4A had 2 young children, ages 3 and 5. The kids were waking up terrified in the middle of the night, thinking there was an earthquake because of the vibrations. We'd all complained. We'd all been ignored. One night, it was a Thursday in late October, I finally had enough. It was 2:30 a.m. I had a presentation to give to my company's executives at 9 a.m., a presentation that could determine whether I got promoted or passed over. I needed to be sharp, rested, professional. Instead, I was lying in bed, staring at my ceiling, watching it vibrate to bass music that sounded like it was coming from inside my skull. I got up, put on my robe, and walked upstairs. This time, I wasn't polite. I pounded on their door, hard, repeatedly. A girl answered, early 20s, holding a beer. She looked annoyed that I'd interrupted her party. Can I help you? The fake politeness that's actually condescension. Turn the music down, now. Excuse me? She looked genuinely offended that I dared to use a direct tone with her. It's 2:30 in the morning. I have work in 6 hours. Turn the music down. She rolled her eyes. It's not even that late, and it's not even that loud. From behind her, one of the guys yelled, "Who is it?" "The neighbor," she called back. "He's complaining again." I heard laughter, actual laughter. The guy from my first visit appeared behind her, the tall one with the baseball cap. He was drunk. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he swayed slightly as he walked. Ah, it's you again. Dude, what's your problem? My problem, I said, my voice shaking now with anger I could barely contain,
is that you're violating building quiet hours, you're violating your lease, you're making it impossible for half the building to sleep, and you don't seem to care." He laughed, actually laughed in my face. "You know what I think? I think you're just a sad, lonely guy who's mad that other people are having fun. That's what I think." I felt something snap inside me. Not violently, but definitively. I realized in that moment that nothing I said would matter. No amount of reasoning, no appeals to empathy or decency. These people simply did not care. And worse, they enjoyed my suffering. My frustration was entertainment to them. So I made a decision right there in that hallway at 2:30 in the morning. I was done asking, done pleading, done hoping they'd suddenly develop respect or consideration. From that moment forward, this was war. But not the kind of war they expected. Not loud, not obvious. A quiet war. A patient war. The kind of war where they wouldn't even know they were losing until it was too late. I looked the guy in the eye and said very calmly, "You're right. I'm sorry for bothering you. Have a good night." His falters slightly. He'd been expecting a fight. Anger. Something he could laugh about after I left. Instead, I just turned around and walked back downstairs. Behind me, I heard him say to his friends, "See? Told you he'd give up." I smiled as I closed my apartment door. Because I hadn't given up. I just changed tactics. The next morning, I started my research. I pulled out my lease agreement, all 47 pages of it, and read every single word. Most people never do this. They sign on the dotted line and never look at it again. But buried in those pages were rules, policies, consequences. Section 7.3, Quiet Hours Policy. All tenants must maintain reasonable noise levels between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. on weekdays, and between midnight and 8 a.m. on weekends. Violations may result in warnings, fines, or lease termination. Section 12.1, Guest Policy. Tenants are responsible for the behavior of their guests. Gatherings of more than 10 people require written permission from building management 48 hours in advance. Section 15.4, Three-Strike Violation Policy. Tenants who receive 3 documented violations of major lease terms within a 6-month period may face eviction proceedings. I highlighted these sections, photographed them, saved them to a folder on my computer labeled Documentation. Then I went deeper. I researched local noise ordinances. In our city, residential
Noise levels are legally capped at 55 decibels during nighttime hours. Anything above that, especially if sustained, constitutes a violation that can be reported to the police. I downloaded a professional-grade decibel meter app on my phone, the kind that law enforcement and environmental inspectors actually use. It cost $12.99, the best money I ever spent. That night, when the music started at 10:15 p.m., I was ready. I opened the app, positioned my phone at different locations in my apartment, and started recording data. Living room, directly under their sound system, 78 decibels average, peak 91 decibels. Bedroom, 72 decibels average, peak 85 decibels. Even my bathroom, the room furthest from their apartment, 65 decibels. All well above the legal limit. All sustained for hours. I took screenshots, saved the data files, created a spreadsheet with dates, times, duration, and decibel readings. October 22nd, 10:15 p.m. to 2:23 a.m., average 78 decibels, peak 91 decibels. October 23rd, 10:47 p.m. to 1:45 a.m., average 82 decibels, peak 95 decibels. October 24th, 11:03 p.m. to 3:12 a.m., average 85 decibels, peak 98 decibels. But I didn't stop there. I also started audio recordings, short clips, just 15 to 30 seconds each, that captured the intensity of the bass, the clarity of the music, the stomping, the shouting. You see, numbers are one thing, but audio recordings are visceral. They make people feel what you've been experiencing. They transform a complaint from abstract to concrete. I collected everything, every night, without fail.
Some nights I was tempted to skip it. I was exhausted. I just wanted to try to sleep, even if it was fitful and interrupted. But I didn't skip a single night, because I knew that the strength of my eventual case would depend on the thoroughness of my documentation. Meanwhile, I was also building relationships with other neighbors. I knocked on Mrs. Chen's door, asked if she'd be willing to put her complaints in writing. She agreed immediately and wrote a heartbreaking 2-page letter describing how the noise had affected her health, her sleep, her quality of life. Marcus, the surgeon, documented how the daytime noise had caused him to make an error at work. Nothing life-threatening, thankfully, but enough to get him written up by his supervisor. He was afraid he might lose his job if his performance kept declining. The Johnsons wrote about their children, how their 3-year-old daughter now refused to sleep in her own bedroom because she was afraid of the shaking monster, how they'd spent hundreds of dollars on white noise machines and sound-dampening curtains that made no difference.
I collected it all. 6 separate households, all with similar stories. All failed by the same management company. I created a shared document, compiled every complaint, every voicemail transcript from calls to the building manager that went unreturned, every email that got generic, unhelpful responses. I even filed Freedom of Information requests to see if any police reports had been filed about the address. There had been 3 noise complaints to the police in the past 2 months alone, filed by neighbors in the adjacent building. I added those to my file. All the while, the students upstairs had no idea. They thought I'd given up, that I'd accepted defeat. I'd see them in the hallway sometimes. They'd smirk, make comments just loud enough for me to hear. Guess he finally learned to deal with it. Yeah, some people just need to grow up. I never responded, just smiled politely and went about my day. Because while they were celebrating their supposed victory, I was building something they couldn't see. A case. Ironclad. Irrefutable. Comprehensive. I also started deploying smaller tactics. Psychological pressure. Nothing illegal. Nothing that could be traced back to me. I learned their schedules. They slept until noon or 1 p.m. most days. The inevitable consequence of staying up until 4 or 5 a.m. So I started making noise during their sleep hours. At 7 a.m., I'd do my laundry. The machines were directly below their bedrooms. I'd run multiple loads, back to back. The vibrations and the sounds would travel up through the pipes and floors. I'd vacuum at 8 a.m., right on the edge of quiet hours ending. Perfectly legal, but loud enough to wake anyone who was sensitive to noise. I'd play music at 9 a.m., not loud enough to violate any rules, but loud enough that they'd hear it. Classical music, ironically. Vivaldi, Beethoven. The kind of music that's beautiful at reasonable volumes, but maddeningly persistent when you're trying to sleep. I'd draw was serious. Multiple times. You chose not to believe me. That was your decision. I started to close my door, then paused. You know what the saddest part is? If you'd just turned the music down the first time I asked, if you'd shown even the smallest amount of respect or consideration, none of this would have happened. You could have had your fun and your parties, just quieter, after reasonable hours, like adults. But instead, you chose arrogance. You chose to mock me, to dismiss me, to treat me like I didn't matter. And now you're learning that actions have consequences. I hope your next neighbors teach you that lesson more gently than I did. I closed the door. Behind it, I could hear them standing in the hallway. Silent. Defeated. Processing the reality that their lives were about to change dramatically. Over the next 30 days, the apartment above me was silent. Not because they'd learned respect, but because they were packing. Moving out. Facing consequences they never thought would come. The elderly couple in 3B thanked me in the hallway one morning. The family in 4A said their kids were finally sleeping through the night again. The young professional in 2C told me she'd been planning to break her lease early because of the noise, but now she was staying. The building was peaceful again. I learned later what happened to them. They tried to fight the eviction. Hired a lawyer, paid for by their parents, as I'd suspected, but David Park, the attorney on the board,
had documented everything so thoroughly that the case was dismissed within 2 weeks. The judge actually commended the building for finally enforcing reasonable community standards. The fine stood $9,400. Their parents had to pay because the students certainly couldn't. I heard through the building grapevine that there were some intense conversations between the students and their families about responsibility and consequences. They moved out on December 28th. I watched from my window as they loaded their belongings into a moving truck. The same massive subwoofer that had started all of this was carried out last. It took 2 of them to lift it, just like it had when they moved in. But this time there was no excitement, no celebration, just exhaustion and defeat. One of them, the tall one with the baseball cap, glanced up at my window one last time before getting in his car. I don't know what he was looking for. Vindication, maybe? Or anger? Or gloating? But I just stood there, coffee in hand, watching calmly. Because I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was just relieved. Relieved that it was over. Relieved that I could finally sleep. Relieved that the building could return to the peaceful community it was supposed to be. The new tenants who moved in 3 weeks later were a married couple in their 40s, both professors at the local university. Quiet. Respectful. They introduced themselves within the first week. Brought cookies. Asked if there was anything they should know about the building. I told them it was a great place to live, as long as you respected your neighbors. Mrs. Chen stopped by my apartment a few weeks after the students left. She brought me homemade dumplings and a handwritten card that said, "Thank you for giving me my peace back. Thank you for not giving up when the rest of us did. You reminded me that standing up for what's right still matters."
I kept that card. Still have it, actually, because it reminded me of something important. That patience isn't weakness. That documentation isn't paranoia. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept unacceptable behavior. Not with violence, not with anger, but with persistence, with evidence, with the quiet, relentless application of rules that exist for a reason. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't lose my temper or stoop to their level. I simply let the facts speak. Let the system work the way it was designed to work. Let patience and preparation do what anger never could. And they did. This was revenge with Adam. The strongest revenge isn't loud. It isn't chaotic. It's patient. It's precise. And when it lands, the echo lasts far longer than any shout ever could. Revenge is patient. Revenge is silent. And sometimes it's closer than you think. If you think this story shocked you, wait until the next one. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. Because here, every story hides a secret, and every secret comes with a price. Drop a comment below if you've ever had nightmare neighbors, or if you've got a revenge story of your own. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, underestimate the quiet ones at your own risk.